Nestled along the tranquil banks of the Ohio River, Point Pleasant is a small town covering just 3 square miles. Geographically, it may not qualify as a major city, but to those who have ever set foot there, it radiates the quiet charm and simplicity that define rural America. And yet it was in this seemingly peaceful town that one of the most bizarre stories in American folklore began, one so strange that it has lingered in the national memory for over half a century. It is the story of human encounters with a mysterious creature, tall, gray, and with glowing red eyes that pierced through the darkness. These encounters not only sparked confusion and fear, but left lasting psychological scars on those who claimed to have seen it. Today, we're going to explore the strange and chilling legend of the Mothman. So fasten your seatbelt as we dive into today's mystery. But first, you'll have incredible luck if you like and subscribe before this video ends. Legends sometimes begin with small, unexplainable things. But in Point Pleasant, the chain of events that led to the legend of the Mothman began with a series of chilling experiences. Occurrences so disturbing that no one could ignore them, especially since they all took place within the span of just 3 days. On November 12, 1966, 5 men were working in a cemetery near the town of Clendenin, about 80 miles from Point Pleasant, when they witnessed something that defied explanation. As they dug into the earth, a massive creature suddenly shot up from a nearby cluster of trees. They described it as a man with wings, and its wingspan was so wide it seemed to block out the sky above their heads before vanishing into the distance. Just 2 nights later, on November 14th, a man named Newell Partridge, who lived in Salem, was watching television at home when the screen abruptly turned to static, accompanied by a strange sound coming from the backyard. When he stepped outside to check, he saw 2 bright red orbs glowing like embers, hovering over the field behind his house. At first, he thought they were reflections, but he quickly realized they were the eyes of a strange creature, standing motionless on a tree branch. By the night of November 15th, the fear had reached its peak. 2 young couples, Roger and Linda Scarberry, along with Steve and Mary Mallet, were driving through an area known as the TNT Zone, a wooded region that once served as a World War II munitions storage site. It was there that they encountered a gray creature, nearly 7 feet tall, with its wings folded behind its back, standing by the side of the road. Lying in front of it was the body of a dog of unknown breed, later believed by many to be Bandit, the dog belonging to Partridge, which had gone missing on the night of November 14th. As their car passed, the creature suddenly launched itself into the air and began to chase them, despite Roger slamming the accelerator and pushing the vehicle to nearly 100 miles per hour. All 4 witnesses later described the creature's eyes as glowing fiercely, like the reflectors of a car, and said the sound it made was a haunting shriek that seemed to pierce straight into their minds. The chase ended only when they reached the center of town, at which point the creature veered off and circled back toward the TNT area. On the morning of November 16, 1966, just 1 day after the terrifying encounter of the 2 young couples at the TNT area, local authorities held an emergency press conference at the Mason County Sheriff's Office. The atmosphere in the room was taut like a stretched wire. Reporters crowded together to catch every detail, while residents sat in silence, watching the testimonies unfold. At the briefing, Dr. Robert Smith, a wildlife expert from West Virginia University, was invited to provide a scientific explanation for the events. He suggested that what people had witnessed might have actually been a large sandhill crane, a bird that could stand up to 6 feet tall and had a ring of reddish feathers around its eyes, something that could easily be mistaken for glowing red eyes under poor lighting conditions. But despite how reasonable it sounded, that explanation failed to convince anyone in the room. Because only a few hours after the first reports were printed in the evening papers of Point Pleasant, a new and even more disturbing incident took place, one that defied any biological theory. That night, Raymond and Kathy Walmsley, along with Marcella Bennett and her young daughter Tina, were driving to visit a relative's home in the suburbs of town. As their car came to a stop, they could immediately sense that something wasn't right. And then, from the ground not far away, a large gray creature, bigger than a man, slowly stood up. Its glowing red eyes pierced through the darkness, causing Marcella to freeze in shock and drop her own child in a panic. She quickly scooped up her daughter and ran into the house. But the nightmare didn't end there. The creature remained nearby, lurking outside the windows and peering inside, sending the entire household into a state of absolute terror. The police were called, but by the time they arrived more than half an hour later, the creature had vanished. With the media covering the events extensively and an increasing number of eyewitnesses stepping forward to share their accounts, the Mothman frenzy had officially erupted. The TNT area, a name commonly used to refer to a stretch of land that once served as a site for the production and storage of explosives during World War II, is home to a series of dome-shaped concrete bunkers hidden deep within dense forest. Overgrown paths, carpeted in moss and shadows, wind between the structures, and beneath them lies a network of underground tunnels so complex that no one can say with certainty they've ever fully explored it. After the war, the area was abandoned and slowly reclaimed by nature. Grass grew taller than a man, tree roots broke through concrete, and the air always felt heavy and dark, as if a storm had just passed. It was in this very place that most of the Mothman encounters were reported, leading many to believe that it served as the creature's home base. Eyewitnesses such as Scarberry, Mallette, and Marcella Bennett all claimed that after their sightings, the creature flew back toward the TNT area, as if it were retreating to the only place it felt safe. The site also borders the McClintock Wildlife Management Area, which spans over 2,500 acres, making the entire region even more remote and difficult to access. It is this isolation, combined with its lingering wartime remnants and ominous atmosphere, that has made the TNT area an ideal breeding ground, both literally and figuratively, for strange and mysterious entities. Then, on December 15th, 1967, disaster struck. The Silver Bridge, which connected Point Pleasant to the state of Ohio, suddenly collapsed into the icy waters of the river below, claiming 46 lives in an instant. It was one of the deadliest bridge accidents in American history at the time, but what truly stunned people was what happened next. After the collapse of the bridge, the Mothman vanished without a trace. The more people heard about the Mothman, the more questions were raised, and like any other strange phenomenon that has ever captured the public's attention, the story of the red-eyed creature in Point Pleasant quickly became a topic of controversy among the media and the scholarly community. As curious visitors began to pour into the town, souvenir shops sprang up, tours of the TNT area were organized, and an annual Mothman festival began to take shape. With this sudden surge of attention, many began to suspect that the entire story was nothing more than a clever ruse, an economic lifeline for a struggling small town. To them, it was simply an urban legend, a modern myth inflated by newspaper headlines and the overly eager belief of local residents. Some critics even argued that the media coverage beginning in mid-November 1966 had ignited a wave of collective imagination, which in turn led to a string of false reports or fabricated sightings meant to attract attention. And yet, amid the rising tide of skepticism, certain details remained difficult to dismiss, especially when one revisits the first 4 encounters. From November 12th to November 15th, 1966, 4 separate groups of people living in different areas and with no connection to one another all reported seeing a strange creature with strikingly similar descriptions: a large gray figure, massive wings, and glowing red eyes. What's more important is this: these encounters all occurred before a single article had been published. If this had truly been a hoax meant to attract tourists, then how could people in Clendenin, Salem, and Point Pleasant have independently come up with stories that matched each other in such uncanny detail? And if their intent was to gain attention, why didn't they go public immediately? Why did they instead go straight to the police, clearly shaken and frightened? Mason County Sheriff George Johnson, who had worked for years with the Scarberry and Mallette families, also confirmed that he had never seen them so terrified. According to him, when the 2 young couples walked into the police station on the night of November 15th, they were trembling, pale, and nearly unable to articulate what they had just experienced. With his years of experience, he did not believe they were acting, and for that reason, he believed they had truly seen something beyond explanation. Of course, once the media became involved, the number of reported Mothman sightings soared, and it's inevitable that some of those stories were exaggerated, but that does not mean the entire phenomenon was fabricated. So what exactly is the Mothman, and where did it come from? In the search for answers, many have looked back to a strange incident that occurred just 1 week before the Mothman first appeared. On the evening of November 2nd, 1966, a man named Woodrow Derenberger, a sewing machine salesman living in Parkersburg, about an hour's drive from Point Pleasant, was driving home from work. While traveling along Interstate 77, his car was suddenly blocked by an unidentified flying object hovering in the road ahead, forcing him to a stop. From inside the craft, which he described as shaped like a large bottle, emerged a tall, humanoid figure dressed in a shimmering suit, its face locked in a fixed, unsettling smile. According to Derenberger, the entity did not speak out loud, but instead communicated directly with his mind, some form of telepathy. It introduced itself as Indrid Cold and asked Derenberger about the bright lights along the horizon, seemingly confused by what were actually just the distant glow of the town. The bizarre conversation lasted several minutes before Indrid Cold returned to the craft and vanished into the night, leaving Derenberger stunned and deeply shaken. Just 1 week later, the Mothman sightings began in Point Pleasant, prompting many to connect the two entities. Both appeared suddenly, inspired overwhelming fear, and were described as something that did not fully belong to this world. In the months that followed, Indrid Cold continued to be reported by other witnesses, particularly in conjunction with a growing number of UFO sightings and paranormal occurrences in the area. Not long after, another name began to circulate through word of mouth: the Grinning Man. Many believed Indrid Cold and the Grinning Man were either the same being or part of the same species. Their appearances weren't limited to West Virginia. Similar figures were reported across South America, Europe, and other parts of the world, often coinciding with unexplained phenomena occurring in the same time period. During the height of the Mothman encounters, UFO sightings became increasingly common throughout Point Pleasant. Residents reported glowing orbs suspended in the night sky, silent flying crafts, and even strange power outages that lasted for several minutes at a time. Some described household items moving on their own, radios turning to static, and an unshakable sense of being watched even when they were alone. And then, as if the story weren't strange enough already, the men in black began to appear. Mysterious individuals dressed in black suits with no clear identity, no visible emotion, and an uncanny presence. They went from house to house, questioning people about the Mothman, intimidating witnesses, and leaving behind a lingering bone-deep chill that many found impossible to explain. Those who encountered them claimed they didn't behave like ordinary people. Their speech was robotic, their movements unnatural, and they seemed unfamiliar with even the most basic elements of human society. All of these elements fueled the growing theory that the Mothman was not a monster at all, but rather an extraterrestrial entity sent here from somewhere else. There is still no conclusive proof, but for many, that possibility seems more plausible than any other. The story of the Mothman is far more than just a local legend. It is a reflection of collective fear, a warning from the shadows, and a reminder that there are still things in this world that science cannot fully explain. If today's story made you think, or reminded you of other unexplained mysteries you've heard, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to continue with us on this journey into the strange and forgotten corners of history, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. We'll see you in the next video.